Hey, it's Don the Auction Professor. Today I just wanted to talk about different ways to do things. There's not just one way to do anything. You know, there are some wrong ways to do things, but for the most part there's a ton of different ways that are all right, that will all get you good results when you're doing eBay. Things that I show you may not work for everybody, that just may not be feasible either in your area or, you know, based on, you know, what your store is, how your store is set up. But, you know, there's other things involved in, you know, how successful someone can be. You know, it could be wording in your listing. It could be how you title things. It could be your photographs. It could be your feedback. It could be your shipping policies, or even how you're setting it up, whether you're doing an auction, a buy it now, or a buy it now with best offer. I mean, there's a ton of different ways to do things. And just because I show you a certain way doesn't mean that there's 100 other options out there to do something differently and to set up your business differently. I hear this all the time from people, you know, that doesn't work for me, I do this and it works fine. That's perfectly fine. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is that you're making money on whatever you're doing. You know, it doesn't even matter what you sell or how you sell it, as long as you're making money and following the rules, at least in my aspect of it. That's what I look at it. I've talked about other things and other options that I've done. I have done some drop shipping. I have done retail arbitrage. I do FBA occasionally still. I sell directly on Amazon. I sell, you know, on eBay, obviously, Etsy, and some other sites, Discogs. But again, there's many options and there's many sources to do it. You know, I hear people talking about Facebook Marketplace. Just one warning. You know, eBay was the Wild West when eBay first started. You could sell all kinds of stuff that weren't even technically legal in some areas. Facebook's going to have those same issues. That one of these days someone's going to get hurt and there's going to be a lawsuit. I can almost guarantee you it. There's already pending issues going on with Facebook from things that I've seen and read. You know, and plus government investigations and things like that too. So anyway, you know, Facebook's fine and dandy. You can make, you know, money on Facebook. Most of the people I know that deal with Facebook Marketplace buy and then turn around and sell those items on eBay. Even eBayers who sell it on Facebook or have moved from eBay to Facebook, you're losing out on money on that, in my opinion. You know, just because things sell for so much higher on eBay, and people literally buy more things from Facebook to just turn around and sell on eBay. But I mean, you know, other things can work. Facebook can work for you depending on your model. But with eBay, eBay has always worked for us. We roll with the punches. We change when we need to change. We address things when we need to address them. If we've done something wrong, we take, you know, responsibility, fix it, and then move on. But you've got to take that mentality when you're doing eBay. You don't have to do it my way. You don't have to follow my model. A lot of people would never want to sit on items for 90 days. We do that all the time, constantly. Many items, you know, I might have up for, or, you know, have in inventory for 5 or 6 months before we even touch into listing them. Just because it's got to be the right time of the year. I would rather hold on to something and get a higher percentage back out of those items than, you know, blow it out the door. I don't need to blow it out the door anymore. And that's another aspect of this that you need to think about. I have a big store that I share with you. I've got 2 anchor stores with 46,000 items in them together, plus another premium store. So, you know, I've got higher levels of store than most people. My fees are less than most people. Anybody who has an anchor store obviously pays the same fees as me. There's no break or anything like that from doing YouTube or anything. I have no affiliation with eBay whatsoever. eBay always has been my #1 primary source of income for online sales. It beats Amazon since Amazon changed FBA and book prices. Before that, things were different, of course, but, you know, you could make a ton of money on books. You still can, but, you know, it's a different market. Things are less profitable on there. And for us, we've moved to a base and what we sell and the things that we have in stock that are really cheap. You know, not just necessarily paper, because that's a percentage of what we do. Records are cheap. Things that cost $1 or less are always the best things to buy if you know what you're looking for. Again, there's other models that work perfectly fine. Clothing sellers, there's still a ton of people who sell clothing and make a ton of money on it. You know, there's people that just sell shoes, there's people that just sell matchbooks, there's people that just sell magazines, print ads, or just even do junk drawer lots. Every single option that there is out in the market, somebody is doing it and making a fortune doing it. You just have to make it your own and figure out the ways around, you know, issues with it. You have to be able to scale, as I've talked about in other videos. So whatever you do, if you can't scale that, that's going to be your funnel section there where you're stuck into a squeeze trying to get past that point. So it may work for a while, but if you don't change up, diversify if you need to, or change your model, that's where people get in trouble. So again, any model could work as long as you know what you're doing and you're aware of your fees. Again, I've talked about this before. I've tried to express what the fees are on eBay. You have to understand the fees. You have to know what you're getting yourself into when you're listing. Keep track. You can look at your fees. You can, after you've listed something, you can even look at your fees on what it would be, after it's sold, beforehand, before it shows up on the invoice. They've added other options in there. The fees are set. They announce when the fees change. It's pretty readily available, the information. There's tons of Reddits out there that talk about the fees, talk about the structure. Again, it doesn't matter the model. It doesn't matter what you sell, as long as you've done your homework and you know that those items are good and that they have a routine where they do sell on a regular basis. If you're going with a model and then the items that you are trying to sell have no history or basis on selling, you don't know what your results are going to be. You don't know if you're going to be successful, and you might just be wasting a lot of money. Again, there's a lot of people who don't want to touch collectibles, who, don't have a care to hear what I have to say about it, which is fine. Every model works. I sell collectibles, and I do a ton of money on collectibles. There's a lot of other people that do collectibles only, and they make money at it. I have done clothing because we started as a clothing seller at one point. I had clothing, books, video games. I got away from high-end electronics. I don't mess with cell phones, iPhones, video game systems, or anything unless they're vintage, because the return rate is so much lower on stuff like that. So I stay away from returnable items that are returned constantly. Clothing-wise, returns happen all the time. You just got to expect that. And for those of you complaining about, the way eBay's returning, if you sell on Amazon, you pretty much have to take a return back no matter what. Or you can have an A to Z complaint against you, and, you're going to lose it no matter what. And you could have bad feedback, and you're still going to have to comp them for or cover the cost and loss on the item. So again, it's just not an eBay thing. It never was. eBay does make a lot of mistakes. eBay does mess around and change things. But again, a lot of these are actually announced. They're told to you. So you just got to pay attention to what's going on. But again, my model may not work for you. Parts of my model may, parts of my model may not. Just like any other seller or YouTuber talking about reselling. Some of them just talk about clothing, and that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with doing clothing. But once your market is drying up, or there's less stores like where we're at, there are less stores for me to buy clothing, and more people actually trying to buy clothing to resell, or just buy clothing in general. The prices are through the roof. There's no savers. There's no bin store. There's no higher-end store. There's very few consignment stores. So for me, I'd have to drive all over the place. I'd have to drive a long ways away. If I wanted to go to a bin, it's 3 hours away in Columbus. Or I'd have to drive to Detroit or someplace that I just don't really care. Nothing against Detroit. I just don't care to do the long drives for a chance at finding something clothing-wise at thrift stores and stuff. It's just not worth it for me. It may be worth it for you, but I can't live on, half a dozen items per store. We buy in bulk. We buy a lot of it. I buy from many different people. And I've talked about this before. I offer a commission, basically, like a finder's fee to certain people. Not everybody gets it, but, for the most part, there are some that get it routinely. Depends on how much you do for me and what you help. I don't mind sharing some of what I get money-wise if it means that I can get more of it. So, and how that works, obviously I have more knowledge in some areas than other people do. So if they turn me on to something and they get a couple $100 just for telling me, and then I make, $1,000, that's just the luck of the draw, because I could lose just as easily as I could, win off those buys. But again, find your model. Find out what you want to sell. And again, the best things to sell are something that you like and are invested into, at least for a personal preference. Like for those of you who are into video games and sell video games, that's a perfect thing for you to sell because you know that area. For me, it's taken a long time to know the area of collectibles and antiques. Again, I've been into collectibles since I was a kid. So, I bought comic books when I was younger. I've collected stamps, trading cards, just all kinds of stuff. So, I know the areas that I sell in very, very well. I research them when I don't need to, just because I like to know as much as I can about the areas. And sometimes when you research the history of certain things, it leads you in different directions and shows you places that you can find the items that maybe you never thought of, or, avenues to sell that you maybe never thought of as well, too. So, again, simple searches can really help to add to your business model. So, again, Don't take my business model as gold for you. You know, it's a starting point for some folks. You know, it does work for me. You see my sold items, you know, on my Sunday videos. You know, and that's just a small portion of what we sell, and that's only in this one store. You know, expanding your business is the goal. You know, you can't be afraid to spend some money. Many businesses may lose money for 5 years, you know, but your model has to be practiced. You have to change it when something isn't right. You have to advance your model. You have to figure out if you hit a funnel point where you can't expand it because you can't scale it, that's going to be your drawback there, where you have to either diversify your model and add more items to it, or, you know, just switch it up and change it all in general. So again, don't count on my model. Don't count on another YouTuber's model. Anybody on YouTube telling you that their model will work for everybody, it's not. They're not being honest with you. It's just not that way. And things change all the time. What was told to you a year ago, or what I said in a first video, that the prices may have changed on something. Things show up all the time. Warehouse finds, auctions of big items, an estate that closed down or somebody passed away, and now they're huge mega collectors auctioned off all of their belongings, you know, either from a living estate or, you know, from someone who's passed. And now there's a ton more on the market. Someone that's been hoarding and they decided to clear out their collection. So something that was rare even 2 weeks ago may not be rare now. So again, you have to invest time and research into your model to make sure your model is going to work. But again, there's just not one way to do any of this. There's tons of different ways. There's tons of people who are much more successful on eBay than I am through things. You know, I admit, you know, I do make mistakes just as everybody does. But when I'm telling you something, I'm telling you it as what I actually have experienced. This is me. This is how I am. This is how I do my business and how I've done it for a long time. You know, I haven't worked for anybody else in 6, 7 years now. At this point, you know, it's just not something that I see any need to do. I am doing financially fine, so, you know, my business model works. It works for me. And, you know, if you can tailor a model, my model or someone else's model, to fit your needs based on what you sell. But again, if you're starting off new, it's going to take you some time to learn. And again, there's no problem with copying off someone's model or selling similar items as them. You know, you've got to start somewhere. I had 0 listings at one point, obviously, and started from scratch. The one thing I can say is that I was never afraid if I lost some money my first year or so. That was the cost of doing business and learning a new whole avenue of revenue. You can't just drop into some business and be so successful. Just like if you get hired onto a business, they're not going to hire you to run the company. They're going to start you at the bottom, and you have to work your way up to show that you know what you're doing. It's the same thing for eBay. I would never recommend anybody just jumping into eBay without reading over a bunch of stuff, practicing in on it, doing a couple listings, maybe even buying some to get your feedback up, you know. Don't just quit your day job and think you're going to make a fortune on eBay. It is not that easy. It is not that quick to get a turnaround from here. It's going to take you months to be able to get enough items up to do a big turnaround. Now, I've heard people talk about, you know, making $20,000, $30,000 a month and only having barely 100, 200 items up. But again, it just doesn't work that way. You can't have a huge business without a bunch of stuff up, for the most part, unless you get very lucky and every month you can find, you know, $10,000 items, $1,000 items. They're not out there that way. You know, I don't have a source for it. I can't rely on something like that. Every month we probably sell something at least for $1,000 or more. But, you know, it's few and far between. There's no guarantee in life. You can't judge a whole model on a couple lucky finds. It just doesn't work that way. And for most everybody I know, they have thousands of items up to be doing any reasonable sales amount. You know, 2, 3, 4, 5,000 items up, 10,000 items up, 20,000 items up. A few years ago, there was a gentleman who had over 100,000 paper items up. He was the paper king, I would call him, at one time. But when eBay changed the fees, he stopped doing it. He only lists 10,000 items now. So, you know, there's many ways around this. You just have to, you know, sway with the punches and change your model up if need be. Pay attention to the changes eBay does. Pay attention to what it does to your sales and adjust your sales accordingly. Look into the issue. Do some Reddits, read some Reddits, and read some posts and see what goes on. Don't be locking yourself into one way to do something forever. For those folks who have been on for years, things change constantly. If you're not switching up and your sales are down, you know, you have to change up. You have to diversify. You have to offer different items. You have to, you know, employ different marketing strategies. You have to employ different pricing strategies, different category strategies. Let's say you've been selling in the same category forever. Switch it up a little bit. Try listing those items in another category. Let's say you have a military book. You know, I would list that in the militaries and the collectibles. I would not list it in the books section. Entertainment books on like a famous person, there's an Elvis section in entertainment collectibles. I would list like an Elvis book there. Or, you know, Lady Gaga book in the Lady Gaga section under performers. You know, you're going to get more traction because it's going to be tied specifically to those people. Like postcards. There's postcards that are military that I do list in the World War I section. There's postcards that I'll list in the post-Civil War section and the Civil War section. You know, period items versus, you know, newer items. And you can do stuff like that. You can list, you know, like political postcards in the political section. Or vice versa. There's many areas to list things in. You know, postage stamps can be listed in different areas. If they're advertising, they could be listed in the Cinderellas, the postage stamp area, or they could be listed in collectibles and advertising instead of the stamp section. So again, just pay attention to what's going on and switch things up. But that's what I have for you today. If you liked the video, please hit the like button down below. You can also hit the bell icon to be notified when I post new content or go live. Subscribe and tell a friend.